Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion is Devarim, the words, and it begins with the first chapters of Deuteronomy. This entire book, the last book of the 5 books of Moses, actually takes place over a 1-week period. How do I know that? So, first of all, if you look at the beginning of Deuteronomy, we have a date. Verse 3, and it came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first day of the month, that Moses spoke to the children of Israel. So we have Moses here beginning his final words to the people of Israel, actually 4 main speeches that he gives to the nation of Israel before his death. And we have the date of the beginning. It is the first day of the 11th month. Now, we know from the book of Joshua, the very beginning of the book of Joshua, in chapter 1, verse 11, Joshua speaks to the nation of Israel, and they say, in another 3 days, we are going to pass into the land of Israel. Later on, though, just a few chapters later, we have a date for the actual date that the children of Israel cross the Jordan and come in to the land of Israel. And we find out that that date is on the 10th day of the first month. That is in chapter 4, verse 19. And the people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and encamped in Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. We have, therefore, a very short passage of time between the first day of the 11th month, when Moses begins his talk, until the children of Israel enter the land of Israel, which is on the 10th day of the first month. We have, in total, approximately 40 days, even less, 37 days, actually. Now, our sages say that Moses actually passed away on the 7th day of the 11th month. And they figure that out. Traditionally, there is a 30-day mourning period. We see this throughout the Bible when somebody passes away. So if we figured that the children of Israel followed the same custom when it came to the death of Moses, that they mourned for 30 days, then if Joshua then talks to the nation, as we saw in chapter 1, the book of Joshua, in 3 days we are going, and if they actually cross the Jordan on the 10th, he would therefore have talked to the nation of Israel at the end of the 7th day, the beginning of the 8th day of the first month. If we go back 30 days from that, we will get to the 7th day of the 11th month. And that is how the calculation is made. Now, all that just goes to say that we have a very long book through with many, many speeches and very important messages that Moses makes sure to give to the children of Israel, all being done in 1 week's time, really just before the death of Moses. What I would like to do now is just to take a look at the very beginning of the speech, the first chapter of Deuteronomy, to see what it is that Moses chooses to begin with. He is now giving his last message of his life. How is he beginning? What is so important? And he starts out, of course, reminding them of they had the battle with Sichon, with the Amorites. He says where exactly they are, that they were sitting at Mount Sinai, which is another word for Mount Sinai is Chorev. They're about to begin their entry into the land of Israel. He's going back in time to that. And what's the first thing he tells? First of all, he says, you're going to go and inherit the land. We see that in verse 8. And then he says that he recalls what happened at that time. He says, I cannot carry this burden myself. This is what he says in verse 9. And then he goes on to talk about how he created essentially a system, a court system, a system of justice, a system of both adjudicating and applying the law, clearly part of administrative procedures that enable him as one person to govern a nation more efficiently and more justly. And he refers, of course, to the importance of justice in verse 16. All of this then goes in preparation for the actual journey from Mount Sinai to the land of Israel. But then what is, and we know we have read, we've just completed the entire book of Numbers. We know that the children of Israel have gone from sin to sin. There has been no lack of issues and problems that we have seen throughout that book. But what is the one issue that he raises here? Of course, the sin of the spies. And he refers to this sin. He starts at that the nation of Israel, this is verse 22, and you came to me, every one of you, and said, we will send men before us, and they shall search us out the land. He suggests, he in this case, unlike the way this particular story actually is presented in the book of Numbers, here Moses presents it as an initiative of the people of Israel to send representatives out to spy out the land, and Moses talks about how he approves of it, how he thinks it's a very good idea. Coming on the heels of his description of dividing up the responsibility of governing the people into officers of tens, officers of hundreds, officers of thousands, various judges, etc., I think this falls very much in line with that idea. He is telling this as not only a question of spying the land, but is a way of sharing responsibility, that the people themselves take responsibility, have this idea to scout out the land, send representatives. And so Moses is not just leading the nation, he, in a sense, is getting ready to lead the nation, but not with this hocus pocus, I have the stick, I'm going to smite the Red Sea and it's going to part and we go forward, which is how they left Egypt. But in preparation of entering the land of Israel, this is going to be done in a much more conventional way. And Moses is setting up the system. And in this case, the initiative to send the spies is part of that idea. Taking initiative, everybody going together, working together, cooperating with different levels of hierarchy to get the job done. And of course, it all falls apart. And here Moses then, of course, refers to the fact that God punishes them, that they are not going to be into the land of Israel. But what does he say here? First of all, he says, and this is in verse 36, he says, he talks about how Caleb is the verse 35 already, he talks about how, no, excuse me, verse 36, Caleb is the only one that will see the land. To him I will give the land that he's trodden upon his children, because he has wholly followed the Lord. So while there is clearly a crisis in being able to delegate the authority to other people to help, Caleb, and then afterwards he also mentions Joshua in verse 38, are two exceptions. In other words, it's not just that Moses should have done this alone, but that there were some people that were okay, Caleb and Joshua. But what does Moses say? He says here in verse 37, and the Lord was angry with me for your sake, saying, you also shall not go in there. Now we know from the book of Numbers that actually Moses is punished not to go into the land of Israel, and much later occurrence, what happens with the rock and bringing forth water from the rock, and it is at that point that God punishes Moses, not here at the place of the spies. But perhaps what Moses is saying here is that his own failure and his inability to enter the land was, in a sense, a failure of leadership. A failure not because Moses did something wrong, but because the children of Israel and Moses' desire to have a more democratic process, to incorporate the children of Israel in leadership and to share in the responsibility, perhaps it was in this that Moses really failed, and that came to a head in the sin of the spies, because in this one major effort where Moses sends out 12 representatives, one from each tribe, 10 of the 12 miserably fail. So in a sense, that failure reflects upon Moses as well and what he was trying to do. The answer, of course, is how the children of Israel are going to enter into the land. There will be one leader, and that leader is Joshua. And it is clearly following, he is Moses' heir. He is going to inherit this single leadership of the children of Israel. Now, it will not be a miraculous sort of leadership with the smiting of the Red Sea, but on the other hand, it is not going to be authority that is spread among many different people. It is going to be one person, Joshua, who will be both leader, both political leader and military leader, and he will lead the children of Israel into the land of Israel. And I think this is a very interesting message that Moses sees to choose first as he first hands over this leadership to Joshua. The first part of what he's saying is about the nature of what that leadership needs to be, both because of the kind of leader that the children of Israel need, and the fact that they do need that one central leader, which is, I think, one of Moses' central messages here in the first chapter. Shabbat Shalom from Samaria.